So, good evening, friends. I welcome all of you to this evening session of Shankar Lodge, Delhi Federation. Before we start our program, let's begin with the universal prayer. Please keep your mics mute. O hidden life, vibrant in every atom. O hidden light, shining in every creature. O hidden love, embracing all in oneness. May each who feels himself as one with thee know he is also one with every other. So, welcome, friends, once again. Today, the topic is discipleship, and it will be taken up by a very serious and senior member of the Theosophical Society, Brother N.C. Krishna. He has been here in Delhi Lodge online meetings earlier also, and he is a national lecturer of the Indian section. He joined the Theosophical Society a long time back, I think more than 50 years, and is very learned, and we welcome him, and we hope to learn more from him. Now, without taking up any more time, I would request Brother N.C. Krishna to please start with his talk on discipleship. Thank you, brother.
Yes. Dear brothers, hearty greetings to all of you. We're going to discuss about the subject discipleship. All the texts, all the scriptures have given a lot of information about this subject. There's not a single text of the Sanatana Dharma, or for that matter, other scriptures of other faiths or religions who have not talked about this subject. So we do have in the literature that is available in the Theosophical Society so much of information about the subject, the discipleship. We do have books, treatises, and articles written by Madame Blavatsky, Madame Anne Besant, Bishop Leadbeater, and few others like Jeffrey Hudson and so many others. So basic information is always available to the person who wants to tread the path. The point is, the more important aspect of life is studying, understanding, owning that information or study content and implementing it in life. That's the most important thing we have to do. And we are attempting to do that very earnestly. That's what I presume. All of us are on that same path. So, going to the subject proper, all the texts, they talk about the basic qualifications for discipleship, and they have been given as basically discrimination and desirelessness. Discrimination and desirelessness, viveka, and desirelessness is translated as not having any desires which are of lower kind, in the sense the one which those which will contribute to the satisfaction of the senses, desirelessness. Vairagya is perhaps another word which we hear often in the Sanatana Dharma. Viveka and Vairagya. Then we have been given also by the Sanatana Dharma the Shat Sampatti, the self-control as to the mind, the self-control as to the action of the limbs, Shama, Dhamma, Niyamas. And added all to this, we have other qualities or other vidyas which we are supposed to acquire, or facets or faculties which you need to have or own. One-pointedness, confidence, cheerfulness, which is a must for a student, and all the more important, tolerance. So our book, which we all prescribe to the new entrants, interestingly, the book At the Feet of the Master, written by Alcyone, and the book, which is compendium of lectures by Madam Anna Besant, The Path of Discipleship, by Dr. Besant, and Masters in the Path by Bishop Leadbeater, and many other such similar sources, similar books give all the details which are required for us to know all about this discipleship. We have two other gems. Light on the Path and The Voice of the Silence, which also give the practical instructions and lots of information about the process and details which an aspirant has to possess and practice. It is said even in the Pythagorean school that the candidate who wants to become a disciple is made to observe a period of probation, and the candidate is observed by his teachers before the teaching proper is given. So this is something which was followed by Pythagoras or Pythagorean schools. Even in our age-old tradition, in the ashramas which we have had in the past, maybe they are there even now. Though the father is an accomplished teacher and an ardent practitioner of Atma Vidya, the student is sent, that is, his son is sent to a distinguished, accomplished teacher elsewhere to be taught all about Vidya or Atma Vidya, as we keep talking about it. That period during which the candidate is observed closely, and with a keen sense by the teacher, was called the probationary period. Sometimes the teacher also gives the responsibilities to his prasishyas so that they keep a watch on the wards who have just joined. So even in the various ashramas which we talked about, before they give the sannyasa diksha, the candidate is watched for a prescribed period of 12 years roughly, and the candidate is called brahmachari, and after due testing and making sure that the student has achieved the qualifications required and he has attained the progress which he is supposed to have attained by that period of time, only then the candidate is ordained. So this is what happens in ashramas too. So coming to our theosophical literature, we come across the term chela, C-H-E-L-A. This is a, maybe if you prefer to call it a Sanskrit term, yes, chela, or it could be somewhere else also, some other language also. And we see this expression being used extensively in the series of the letters received from the Masters of the Wisdom. And before he becomes a chela, there is definitely a period of probation, which we all know about it. And now that we have read about it, we know about it, not that we have gone through it. Before the chairmanship is conferred, the candidate spends valuable time waiting, waiting ardently, waiting anxiously, in a sense, when that period will be completed, how much of work he has to do, all that is going through his mind. So that's why perhaps there is a bit of anxiety in the mind of the student. Actually, anxiety is not supposed to be there, but since he is in the beginning stages of his life as a student, maybe yes, he is still wanting to pass the test. So there is a bit of anxiety in him. So the candidates basically are made to listen. They are all asked to listen, and they are not even asked or allowed to question. Normally in a school, the student gets up and says, I have not understood this. But the student who is in a school learning is only asked to listen, only to listen. So this is something which happens in all these schools. This is the same practice that was adopted by the Pythagorean schools and also some of the schools which were prevalent in Asian countries like Tibet and India. For example, the Nalanda, which is now called a university, but the place which is near to Andhra Pradesh. So that's where the Nagarjuna and other people lived. Even there, this practice was adopted. And Buddhist monasteries also have this practice of making the students only to listen. And that person who is listening, the student who is listening, is called Shrota or Shravaka. This is what is the name given to the person who is listening. So what is expected out of the candidate is complete, careful understanding of whatever information that has been passed down to him, and to mull over that information, understand that information, and understand and internalize that information. That's what is expected out of a student who is a Shravaka or a Shrota. The Shravaka and the Shrota are borrowed from the Buddhist literature. But Shrota is also there in Sanskrit. Shravana is also there in Sanskrit. So the one who listens is called Shravaka. So this is something which we can deduce. In the Gurukulas, the students were expected to do Guru Seva, do all that the Guru gives instructions to do. It could be anything. Only on attaining a stage of a person capable of receiving direct instructions in Paravidya or Atmavidya, the student or the aspirant was given the opportunity to receive instructions from the teacher. The student learns Guru Mukhatha, the words or the expressions which come out of the voice of the teacher. That's why it is called Guru Mukhatha. So there are stages as the candidate or student shows an essence, various steps the student passes, the few stages before he becomes eligible to receive direct instructions. They're all there. In the literature of the Theosophical Society, we have said that he becomes first a man of ideals. A man of ideals. So he starts practicing the ideals which he thinks are very important to move him forward. And then he enters the probationary or the stage of observation. Then he becomes a prasishya, a sishya who is very close to the master before he gets initiated. So this is how the stage or stages of progress are. We will see some basic traits one should develop before he attains the stage of discipleship, though perhaps throughout the discussion we may use the word disciple what perhaps needs to be understood is an aspirant to become a disciple. But to be short, we're using the word disciple. To be direct, we're using the word disciple. Disciple practices all these qualities which are listed out, or an attempt has been made to list out, to achieve further progress. We'll examine few of those qualities or details. Most of these ideas are well known or familiar to the students of theosophy. It is only for the purpose of recapitulation and implementation that we're discussing this content this evening. At the outset, disciple is one who has discipline. Disciple is one who has discipline. In the English language, these two words phonetically seem to be sounding almost the same. And even in the spelling, there's a lot of similarity between disciple and discipline. So at the outset, disciple is one who has discipline. So we are aware that there are disciplines, various types of disciplines. Broadly, they fall into two categories. Mostly the discipline imposed by the ashrama dharmadhikari. There is one chief executive of a ashrama, say for example, that person's name is called dharmadhikari. And ashrama dharmadhikari, he prescribes all the do's and don'ts. And so that is the discipline imposed by the ashrama dharmadhikari, is what we call discipline in one sense. This is what all ashramites adhere to. It is prescribed by an external agency, as we can see. There is a second type of discipline, which is a person who wants to earn or who wants to attain progress and attain spiritual unfurlment, chooses to do. And this is a self-imposed discipline. Self-imposed discipline, and one is very sure and committed to follow the self-regulations to attain the avowed goal, or the goal which is being attempted, which is naturally reaching the stage of discipleship and further reaching the stage of perfection. During the process, he meets his teacher. That is something which happens when he reaches the stage of arhata, or eligibility, and he becomes in a way altruistic in his approach. So that's at that stage when the teacher appears. So this second method of self-imposed discipline is a better method, we are told, as the discipline would be chosen by the person himself to do what he wants to do and to choose what not to do. So he prescribes the rules for himself based on his study and contemplation. Based on his study and contemplation, he arrives at those rules to do and not to do. Hence, the discipline, which is self-imposed, has to be followed strictly with regularity. By the aspiring disciple, he has to strictly follow the discipline which he has chosen all by himself with regularity. And he will not give a break. He will not give a break and declare holidays all by himself to the regimen or practices he has decided to follow. Because regularity, punctuality, and say, for example, getting up in the morning, the Brahmi Muhurta, say at 3:30 a.m., is something which he has chosen to do. So which he has to do. All things become irrelevant. The discipline becomes paramount importance. Then self-discipline or self-imposed discipline is the key for individuals' progress. We are not in a sort of factory turning out disciples of the same typecast. This is a process of flowering naturally flowering and unfoldment happening from within. This person, this aspirant, is responsible to himself for his progress or for his determined. Otherwise, progress or otherwise. He partakes and is responsible for his success or even failure. So he has no one to blame. There is no person who would take his blame or take credit for his success, but he would go faithfully on the rules prescribed by himself. And this is the better way of moving forward for the individual's progress. He practices all the contents of the discipline with concern and commitment. Concern is not to be misunderstood as worry. Concern means concern that he should reach the stage of discipleship and commitment. The disciple, right through the ages, has been doing these three things: study, which is svadhyayana; meditation, which is jhana; service, which is seva. So these are the three roots again: the study, which is called svadhyayana, and meditation, which is called dhyana, and service, which is translated as seva. So before we move on to things which are of importance, all right, but then something which we have, or people like us have noted it down, we'll talk about what Master K.H. says. Of course, these are all extracts from the letters from the Masters of the Wisdom. Master K.H. says, disciple has to avoid three poisons. They are anger, greed, and delusion. They are anger, greed, and delusion. Disciple has to avoid three poisons. So these three things: delusion, yes, I have not progressed, or I'm in a state of depression. This is something which he need not have at all. So anger, greed, and delusion have to be avoided. And there are three poisons, says Master Kuthumi, or KH as we call him. Master KH also talks about five obstructions, and they stand in the way of perceiving the truth. He talks about five obstructions which stand in the way of perceiving the truth. The obstructions are envy, passions like lust, etc., vacillation, sloth, and disbelief. These are the five obstructions. So this is again prescribed or conveyed to us through that letter by Master KH, number 45 of the older edition. It is envy, passions, vacillation, and sloth, laziness, and disbelief. Right? Then the Master says, if the disciple has to shorten the distance between himself and the Master, disciple or the aspirant should get rid of these obstructions. Get rid of these obstructions. So it's quite a sadhana, because we should not be envious, we should not be yielding to passions, we should not be vacillating, we should be getting that sthiratva in our mental attitude, and then we should say goodbye to laziness, and we'll only stay with belief, and we'll not have any disbelief about our own capabilities or the direction which we are sure to get. Master KH warns the disciple not to get trapped in the eyes of birth and death. So this is something which we should avoid. The method, of course, we all know by reading the various scriptures. How do we get rid of this eyes of birth and death? How can we avoid this? Not to lead a life of uncharitable spirit. Master says the aspirant should not lead a life of uncharitable spirit. Be charitable, be loving, and be giving. Master suggests not to harbor ill feelings, even against the enemy, if there is one. Because if you have conquered all your passions, all the method of living is perfect, perhaps there is no enemy. But then Master suggests that the aspirant should not harbor ill feelings even against the enemy or someone who has wronged us. It could happen because you are not someone who would perhaps resist or fight. A lot of times people may take you for granted. And so there could be people who will wrong or do something which is not good for us. So don't harbor ill feelings even against them. So this is another prescription of Master KH. In another letter, Master KH says not to project one's personality. So this is something again which has to come with a lot of sadhana. In another letter, Master KH says not to project one's personality, vanity, and conceit. So very valuable instruction, not to project the personality and not to exhibit vanity or conceit. Master M wrote to President H.S. Olcott, Master Maurya wrote to President Olcott. I'm not quoting exactly, it's not verbatim. I'm not able to produce that because I'm not able to lay my hands on that original. I'm not a disembodied spirit, says Master M to Olcott. I'm not a disembodied spirit, brother. I'm not a disembodied spirit. I'm a living man gifted with such powers by our Lodge, means all the people, the inner government of the world, or the hierarchy, which we know as the Great White Brotherhood. So he says, Master M says, that I am not a disembodied spirit, brother. I am a living man gifted with such powers by our Lodge as are in store for yourself someday. Yes, they are in store for ourselves someday, provided we are on the path, we are working, we are serious of becoming disciples. So these are the important points which the masters have given to us. And then I move on to my notes, which anybody could write. I think it's something which anybody who thinks about discipline and the way to go forward can write. So this is something which I have jotted down in my personal notebook, which I thought I would share it with you. Disciple must not dissipate his energy. Disciple will not dissipate his energy. He will conserve his energy, conserve it for the purpose of being on the path, working on the path. And he works with devotion and diligence. This discipline is a must, and to tread the path, the commitment to discipline and commitment to the path and the devotion to the cause is of paramount importance. And in a way, the path helps to understand himself better. In a way, the discipline is a path, is a way to understand himself. Idea is to be with the inner core being of ourselves. That is the idea. Why do we have to be externally projecting our senses and trying to observe what's happening in the world? That's one way of living, Pravritti Marga. Idea is to be constantly with that inner core being. Take the practice of, or get into the practice of Nivritti Marga, the withdrawal part of the journey. So he follows, the aspirant follows the call of the conscience, his conscience, it will give a call or notice only once. The conscience will give him a notice or call only once. If the disciple chooses to ignore it, suppress it, it is his choice. It will not repeat it again and again. So this is something which we have to know about the call of the conscience. And if one chooses to miss the call, maybe he chooses a method of progressing further or a tip to progress further. And when he uses the power of discretion, if one follows the inner call and says, yes, this is what I have been doing, this is what I'm asked to do, the tip given to me is this. So if he follows that and uses his discretion, in 9 out of the 10 cases, the call of the conscious will give the right direction. If the aspirant goes by what the head says, or what the brain says, the chances are that in 9 cases out of 10, one is misled. Then either the disciple stagnates, or if the disciple is yielding to his head or to the dictates of his body, the disciple may slip from the path and the position he must have worked till then to reach a stage in the ladder of progress. So this is something which we have to very carefully observe. Next, the disciple has to obey the laws of nature, laws, L-A-W-S, the laws of nature. By following the laws, one's progress is swifter and faster and sure. Not cooperating with the laws of nature, the journey becomes an uphill task. So his progress is determined the way he positions himself vis-a-vis the nature's laws. So not following the nature's laws, not cooperating with the nature's laws, his progress will be deterred or retarded, may not proceed further or faster. And then next, disciple is guided by a plan. What is that plan? He is guided by the divine plan as revealed to him by his study and meditation. Disciple is guided by a plan, which is the divine plan, as that is revealed to him by his study and meditation. Sometimes he understands more through dhyana than the study. Sometimes he understands more through dhyana than study, and the plan reveals itself as he starts honoring and following the steps. And lives in accordance with that divine plan, which is open to him. Whatever little portion is open to him, what are the steps which lead to the divine plan, when they are known to him, yes, he would progress. The discipline which has been chosen by himself, as we have seen, there are 2 disciplines. Self-imposed discipline is something which he has chosen. The discipline which has been chosen by himself enables him to execute the plan, the divine plan, effectively, correctly, because he knows what adjustments need to be made. As we have said, in the second type of discipline, where he has laid down the rules of his conduct or the way he will live, the rules can be altered definitely by the disciple himself, if only if the change is for the better, and if that change would further improve his disciplined life. Then he can change, not to give relaxations. He will not alter the conduct rules which he has prescribed for himself to give more allowances for himself, but he would definitely alter the rules if they are for the betterment and if the change further improves the disciplined life. Ordinarily speaking, normally in academic pursuits, a disciple can choose a master. He can decide where, from whom one can learn, say, meditation, say, mathematics, not meditation, say, mathematics, or choose his guide to submit his thesis to get a PhD. Yes, there are teachers who teach meditation also, yes, but one can choose. On the path of occultism, on the path of the inner journey, the master chooses the disciple. In that case, master can prescribe, suggest certain rules which the disciple has to rightly understand and follow. When he gives a word to his master to follow and takes up the vow to follow, the rules are no longer those which have been prescribed by the master, but the disciple owns those rules. So, the disciple has to follow those rules suggested. He only suggests, he will not force you to follow. Master will not force you to follow. He will only suggest. So if you have chosen it, if you have taken a vow to follow them, then you follow them to the last word. The disciple masters, and sometimes not just the rudiments of the occultism, but practices the advanced contents of occultism. Occultism necessarily doesn't mean showing certain miracles or etc., but then the right way of living, which would be taking care of everybody else who is on the path and people who are not on the path. Masters will not remind the disciple to follow the discipline, or they will not prescribe, they will only suggest. At this level, no goading, no repeating, saying that you have to follow this is given or done at any point of time by the learned ones or the wise ones. But this is done by the teachers in the ordinary school which we go to learn a subject, say like mathematics. So there is a difference between the academics and the way in which we learn the Gupta Vidya. Then what are the qualities or qualifications the master looks for in a disciple? If you see that, basically master looks for those who are unselfish. And the virtue of selflessness, whether that is the way of life of the disciple or not, is something which the master or his prasishyas will observe. So master, of course, is in a very elevated stage of his evolution, and he, being the master, works always for the welfare of humanity. Naturally, master is interested in picking those who find happiness in helping others and not being happy and busy helping themselves. So it is working for others which is of paramount importance, and not anymore working for myself, my pleasure, my position, etc. Disciple lives for others. Disciple lives for others. So that's the reason why the welfare of humanity becomes of paramount importance. He no longer lives for himself. Whether the disciple is a follower of the law of renunciation is something which is taken note of. Disciple has given up or is not interested in accumulating personal wealth. He is no longer interested in accumulating personal wealth. He leads a simple life. And he is not someone who is scheming or working towards attaining a worldly position. So he would not be a person who would work for a worldly position, status, or maybe occupying a post which will give you a lot of authority. So he will not be a person. The aspirant or disciple will not be a person who will personally go after wealth or scheme to reach a stage of acquiring a position which has a lot of authority. He will not be a person who will work for name and fame. Disciple will not be a person who will not be working for name and fame. These are all things which are observed. We may think that nobody is observing us, but when we are on the path, there are a lot of people, a lot of well-intended people who are observing us. And the person with these qualities of especially unselfishness appears like a beacon light to those people who are observing us. And they are picked up. Maybe even the message that they've been picked up also is not given, but then it happens. So disciple, more or less, is not interested in worldly pursuits. That's the most notable thing. One important thing which a disciple should renounce is his personal petty self. We talked about selflessness, but then we store a bit of personal self. This much I can have is some sort of a understanding we get to. So even that personal petty self is something which we have to get rid of. So this self, whatever may be its size, is of no use or no avail to the aspirant. HPB says about desire, basically desire is blind, like a blind horse. Whatever direction we give, the desire takes the direction. So this is a point which is appearing in the Path of Occultism, the book, the small book, the Path of Occultism. Hence, the disciple gives the right direction to his desires and converts his desires into Ichha Shakti, the will power, the will to achieve, the will to work for others. So the desires are converted to will or Ichha Shakti. Desires cannot be removed or eschewed, says the book, by suppressing the desires. Disciple has to understand the nature of desire. Desire is not some coming to an end by satisfying the desire one more time. This is the last time I will have it, and from tomorrow I will not have it. Suppose one goes through the process of satisfying the desire which has come up. That's not going to put an end to it. That's what it means. What exactly happens when one is going through or experiencing or having what the desire wants you to have? Then he has to observe whether the units of satisfaction derived in that fleeting moment, whether they're permanent or they're transitory. That is something which he has to understand and contemplate on the nature of the desire in all its aspects. Then contemplate on the nature of the desire in all its aspects. Then the aspirant can move away, the disciple can move away from desireful life. So that way he cleanses his desire body. That way he cleanses his desire body. The ability is there. This ability of cleansing, the Sthula Sarira and the Kama Sarira, is there in everyone. What is required is implementation. We have a very big vacuum cleaner within us. We can clean, of course, but then we don't do it. We don't implement it. We don't use it. That's the problem. So if we move away from desirelessness, we move towards desirelessness or a state where there is equanimity. This is what the disciple is supposed to do with his astral body or astral contents of his body. The place vacated by a desire, this is also very important suggestion given. The place vacated by a desire should be filled by a virtue, so that even if the desire wants to take back its place, having moved out, it wants to come back and take its place, it's not available. The place is not available. It's occupied by a virtue. So immediately on removing a desire, we should fill that place with a virtue. Say, for example, I've been taking all the time. I've been taking all the time. I remove the taking aspect from my life and replace it with giving. I start giving. So when I start giving, the taking will not come back and occupy the place which it has vacated some time back. So this is something which you have to do. Disciples should watch out for aham. We call it aham in Sanskrit, which is ego or egofulness. Some people call it ahankara. Ahankara could be even called pride. So this is ego, aham, and egofulness. Even this thought that one is on the path. Sometimes we have a feeling that I am special, I am on the path. Even that is one way of filling your ego with unnecessary content. So I'm trying to tread the path, I am on the path, and talking about the practices which I'm doing with all the rest of the people to make an impression that will make the disciple ego full. So he has to replace egofulness with egolessness. No need to talk about what you're doing. You can be a silent worker, silent practitioner, and need not have to discuss with those people, especially who are not on the path. This is possible by keeping a constant vigil on oneself and question oneself objectively. Question oneself objectively. Is there ego in me or egolessness in me? This is something which one can observe very carefully. By doing whatever I'm doing, is my ego getting satisfied or getting initiated? So disciple has to watch out, move away consciously, even if that is painful. See, to chop off what you have built over a period of time is very painful. Even if it is painful, we have to do that. So move away from egofulness to egolessness. This is a journey which has to do constantly, constantly. If you do it today and forget about it tomorrow, it won't help. Our actions need immediacy. Our actions need immediacy. So action is required to nip the bud of selfishness and egofulness. And the disciple has to exert to remove the outer crest or cover of selfishness. Normally the personality is like this, covered with a lot of things which are not required. So he has to work, exert to remove the outer crest or cover, and he should become or transform into a selfless seed or a nut or a fruit, if you can want to call it that way. And that selfless seed will be a seed in the garden of evolution. To hasten disciples' evolution, efforts should be continuous, sharpening the saw, as people call it, to cut which separates the non-essentials from disciples' life is a must. The sharpening with the saw, with which we cut normally wood, etc. So that saw has to be sharpened continuously. So which separates the non-essentials from disciples' life, and this is a must. If the disciple has less luggage or baggage, as we call it, he can tread the path, the narrow, steep path, effectively, effortlessly. He can walk on that path comfortably. The heaviest luggage, if you can imagine what it is the weight of oneself, in the sense the personality, the habits, the thoughts, all that is the weight which we have. So how to be weightless, as we talked about egolessness, chop all that is not required, chop all that is not required, and move comfortably with less luggage. And to taste that nut or fruit of realization, the husk has to be removed. To taste the nut or fruit of realization, the husk has to be removed. More often than not, we are satisfied with the husk. The disciple needs to be diligent. Look, what is the husk and what is the seed? Work for the fruit, meaning he should work towards realization of what is essential, not satisfy with the husk, not satisfy himself with non-essentials. And having achieved that, share the taste of the fruit with others who deserve, not all, whoever deserves to share that particular seed with all the people who deserve to know those things. If one has to walk on a steep path, the narrow path, jettisoning, like the captain jettisons to save the ship sometimes, if it is overloaded. So if one has to walk on the steep path, the narrow path, jettisoning the non-essentials is a must. And disciples should walk on the path less traveled by others, even if that path is thorny. So there's no point in going on the same track. So disciples should walk on the path less traveled by others, even if the path is thorny. So this is something which he has to decide very carefully, lot of discretion, lot of judgment. So he has to do that. Disciple has to reach the goal, which is perfection. That goal, which is nothing to do with the physical progress, as we keep often misunderstanding. That goal is always before the aspirant's inner eye. That goal is always before the aspirant's inner eye, the manochakshu. It's a constant eye. The aspirant has a constant eye, not a casual eye. He has a constant eye and not a casual eye. Work ceaselessly. Work ceaselessly. Disciple doesn't move away from the object even for a split second. A second of distraction, a second 60 units. The second of distraction is good enough to fall away from the path. Disciple has to have shraddha, one-pointedness, as he moves towards his goal, which is on the path of, that is, realization or being accepted as a disciple, or for that matter, a path which he has chosen all by himself to be of help to humanity, and a path which the disciple is laying all by himself. This is something which not somebody has laid the road and you're walking on it. You have decided to lay the path all by yourself, or oneself. I should not say yourself. Disciple has to lead a contemplative life. Anything he does is after due thought. Disciple has to lead a contemplative life. Anything he does is after due thought. He learns to watch every thought, word, and deed. There are no aberrations in his life. There are no aberrations in his life. His life is full of musical notes and perfect musical notes. Self-introspection and exercise is a must, which enables the disciple to see objectively whether the weed of self is projecting its ugly head once in a way. Review his actions. Introspection also helps him to review his actions, thoughts, and words. And this practice will ensure elimination of undesirables and adding more virtues like love and compassion. Needless to say, meditation plays a very important role in a disciple's life. Disciple, after perfecting the rudiments of meditation, he learns to keep a virtue, a sublime ideal, to become that virtue, to become that sublime ideal. He becomes an epitome of that virtue, of that sublime ideal, with his manana and nididhyasa, which is part of meditation. Disciple is practicing dharma, righteousness. He is one with strong moral character. He learns to concentrate on the work, on the process. He learns to concentrate on the work, on the process. He is not unduly bothered about the results. Then we talked about study. The study of the disciple should enable the disciple to pick not only rudiments, but also, as we have seen in the beginning, they applied advanced principles of higher living or occultism. This occult study should open the gates of intuition. This occult study should open the gates of intuition, and study is not meant for exhibiting erudition. The study is not meant for exhibiting erudition, panditya prakarsha, as we call it in Sanskrit. It's not meant for that. It's not to show off that I'm a learned person, but it is to live that particular wisdom which I have picked up or which I have understood, which I have owned. That's more important. If the disciple has decided and has resolved to work for the welfare of humanity, even his resting hours could also be useful to many who need his help and who are suffering. He should willingly become a worker in the band of service who move around to alleviate the suffering of the humanity. So he could be a willing volunteer in that particular group. The disciple has to undertake the purification process of his vestures, which we talked about astral body sometime back. All his vestures have to be clean. Master K.H. says, we'll stop with this. Master K.H. says, purification process is not the work of a moment or of a few days or months, but purification process extends to years. No. It extends to series of lives, says the Master. So the later we begin, the later we reach. So this is something which we all know, and we have seen a lot of this information, which was, I think any person who thinks about it will be able to write all this or talk about all this. So write in an essay, I mean, or talk about it in a method in which everybody will be able to recapitulate, reflect, and implement. That's the most important thing in life. So that's implementation is the most important thing. And with this, I will say as the time is up, there could be many more points which would come up as we think along, travel along. Maybe we'll reserve some for a future date. Thank you so much, Rajivji.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Brother Krishnaji, for a wonderful exposition on this topic of discipleship. Now, I would request our members here. I can see Brother Shindeji is here. Shindeji, would you like to elaborate or comment on what brother has said?
Oh, Brother Krishna has explained very nicely. Nothing to be told now, because we must contemplate on all this very sincerely. Then only we can become a disciple. To be a disciple, we must be self-reliant. That is what he said. First, having control over our base nature, so that our true nature expresses. What is our true nature? As we know, courtesy, simplicity, sympathy, compassion. So all these they express. And disciple is one who lives the teachings. This is what teaching is given by the masters, by the theosophical literatures, all the leaders, they are speaking about this. So as Krishna said, we must contemplate on all these points. This contemplation itself gives you what is egoism, how it expresses, Egoism expresses as likings, that is, exists as nationality also. We love our own country, we love our religion, we love our guru, and immediately opposite it, dislike also exists as ego. We enmity other caste, the followers of another guru. So when ego is there, hatred must be there. So to make the life simple, these complications of ego need to be understood. That is what Krishna, all the lecture expressed. And this giant weed of selfishness, HPB used this term, giant weed of selfishness, need to be rooted out. Pruning makes no difference. So if we remember these points, so the disciple is one who lives the teachings, and very great teachings, very valuable teachings are found in our Theosophical Society, in the Mahatma letters. That is what Krishna, the whole lecture he gave on this. I am very happy to listen him right from the beginning. Thank you, Krishna. Thank you for giving this nice talk.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Shindeji. Now I'll request Brother Ashok Bakhandeji if he wants to add on to something to what Brother Shinde and Brother Krishna have said.
बंधु कृष्णा जी ने जो सब क्वालिटी, क्योंकि शिष्यत्व इस विषय पर बहुत सारे धर्म ग्रंथों में भी इसका उल्लेख आया है, अनेक तरह से शिष्यत्व की व्याख्या की गई है। मैं अपनी तरफ से इतना ही ऐड करूंगा कि जब हम थियोसॉफी के स्टूडेंट होते हैं तो ये चीज़, ये विश्व का जो पूरा परियोजना है, जो प्लान है इवोल्यूशन का, तो जो थियोसॉफी का स्टूडेंट होता है वो ये समझ जाता है कि इस इवोल्यूशन के प्लान के तहत मेरा ये जीवन है। तो उस वक़्त उसका एटीट्यूड जो है कि इस इवोल्यूशन के प्लान को मैं कैसे सपोर्ट करूं, ये भावना। और एक बड़ी बात इन्होंने बहुत अच्छी बात कही है कि गुरु को आप मत ढूंढिए, आपके अंदर वो सर्टन क्वालिटी डेवलप होने के बाद स्वयं गुरुदेव आपकी तलाश में हैं, वो आपको चुन लेंगे। तो ये बलात् प्रयास भी नहीं करना चाहिए कि मैं एक गुरु का शिष्य बन जाऊं, क्योंकि शिष्यत्व ये स्वयं को अर्जित करना होता है। जैसे इस्लाम में कहा गया है कि खुदा गवाह, मैं जो कुछ कर रहा हूँ उसको खुदा देख रहा है। ये भावना जब हमारे अंदर प्रगाढ़ हो जाए कि मेरी हर कृति, मेरा हर किया कराया इस इवोल्यूशन प्लान को डिस्ट्रॉय करता है या सपोर्ट करता है, ये भावना मेरे अंदर जब जग जाती है, और ये भी भावना जैसी खुदा गवाह की है कि गुरुदेव मुझे देख रहे हैं, ये सब करते हुए ये जो कांस्टेंट अवेयरनेस है आदमी को अगर प्राप्त कर लिया, बाकी सब चीज़ें एक एक चीज़ निकालने को समय लगेगा, ईगो निकालने को समय लगेगा, ग्रीड निकालने को समय लगेगा। केवल ये दो कंसेप्ट अगर हम अपने जेहन में डाल दें बड़े गहरे में कि मेरे हर कृत्य को कोई वॉच कर रहा है, और दूसरी बात मैं इस इवोल्यूशन के अंदर इस गुरुदेव का जो एक महात्माओं का जो प्लान है उसमें कितना हेल्पफुल मेरा जीवन हो रहा है, बस ये दो ही बैरोमीटर का यूज करते हुए अगर वो जीता जाए तो ये शिष्यत्व की अर्जित करने की उसकी शुरुआत हो जाती है। महाराष्ट्र के संत ज्ञानेश्वर ने कहा है कि वो कहते हैं कि जैसे जैसे तुम्हारे अंदर ये चीज़ें डेवलप होती जाएगी, आगे आगे तुमको किसी ने मुझे पहचानना चाहिए, किसी ने मुझे नमस्कार करना चाहिए, किसी ने मुझे मान सम्मान देना चाहिए। ये मान सम्मान अगर कहीं से आपको मिलता है तो आपको अंदर से आप अनईजी फील करते हो, ऐसा लगता ही नहीं कि मेरे को लोग जाने, मैं बहुत प्रसिद्ध हो जाऊं। तो ये जो अपनी पर्सनालिटी इम्पोज करने का जो एक स्वभाव था मनुष्य के अंदर ये होता है, वो धीरे धीरे खत्म होते जाता है। और ऐसी अवस्था जब हमारी आती है तो हम शिष्यत्व की ओर कुछ कदम चल रहे हैं, क्योंकि शिष्यत्व एक अर्जित करने वाली बात है, ये मिल नहीं जाती। लेकिन जन सामान्य में हम जो देखते हैं कि कोई गुरु होते हैं, फिर उनके हम शिष्य हो जाते हैं, फिर उनकी सीख में चलते हैं। लेकिन थियोसॉफी बहुत हाई लेवल से और वास्ट उसकी ये है। तो इस तरह से शिष्यत्व को हमें अर्जित करना है। बंधु कृष्णा जी ने ये सारी चीजें इसमें कवर की है। मैं धन्यवाद देता हूँ कृष्णा जी को, बड़े डिटेलिंग उन्होंने शिष्यत्व की किए है। और राजीव जी को भी मैं धन्यवाद देता हूँ, मुझे बोलने का मौका दिया। थैंक यू वेरी मच। बहुत अच्छा सेशन रहा कृष्णा सर, बहुत अच्छी बातें आपने यहाँ पर बताई कि ये सारी क्वालिटी हमको अलग दो तरीके से अर्जित करना है। एक तो ये सारे दोषों के ऊपर फोकस करके हमारे अंदर हमको निकालने का प्रयास करना है, वो टाइम कंज्यूमिंग है। लेकिन अगर ये दो बातें हम मान ले कि हमारा हर कृत्य अगर कोई देख रहा है, गुरुदेव देख रहे हैं, एक इसके कांस्टेंट अवेयरनेस जो ज्ञानेश्वर ने कहा है वो होना है। और दूसरी बात, इवोल्यूशन के प्लान के तहत हम पैदा हुए हैं, और ये इवोल्यूशन को, गुरुदेव के कार्य को हम अपने कृत्य से कितनी मदद कर सकते हैं। तो ये सब मदद करते हुए हमारा ईगो जब ये बात मान लिए कि क्या गलत है क्या उचित है, इसका जो बैरोमीटर हमारे पास दिया है कि इवोल्यूशन का प्लान, तो मुझे लगता है कि हम वहीं के वहीं सेट आउट अच्छा अपने आप को दुरुस्त कर लेते हैं। और ये क्वालिटी धीरे धीरे बढ़ते हुए हम शिष्यत्व अर्जित करने के लिए अग्रसर होते हैं। थियोसॉफी ने इसके ऊपर बहुत ज्यादा फोकस किया। थैंक यू वेरी मच फॉर गिविंग चांस टू express my views. Thank you.
Since we are wedded to the personality, the lower portion of our life, the lower ordinary, it's very difficult unless we realize what is to be removed and work at it. Like Master said, maybe for life's time we have to work at it. Only then we will achieve. So without achieving, without identifying the weaknesses in me, I've also talked about the plan divine, how it opens up itself in the meditation. So nobody shows the plan. The plan is revealed to you through meditation. This is something which I have covered. But then we are mostly concerned with our lower quaternary. So how do we cleanse those bodies? That's very important. That's how we drop all that is not essential. That's what I meant when I said we have to chop off all that is not essential.
Thank you, Brother Krishna. Thank you, Brother Lokhande ji. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. We have another brother, senior member from Kerala. I can see Brother Dinakaran. Brother, would you like to share your views on this topic?
Hello. Good evening, everybody. I'm audible?
Yes, brother, yes.
Okay. Thank you, Brother Krishna, for your wonderful talk on this evening on discipleship. It's a very serious subject which needs great attention of our TS members. I don't want to add much because all the points have been covered in brief by Brother Krishna. And Brother Lokhande also explained the way to test our life on this path by always considering our actions, whether when Master appears, how we will do this work, whether our actions are desirable to the Master's plan. In such a way we can move on this path. I remember Dr. Besson once said, we have undertaken the work not for a year, not for a decade, but a work for throughout our life that we have to consider, because sometimes people due to excitement enter into this path, and after a few years they feel disappointed and what we call in yogic terms yoga brashta. But even in that condition we need not be disappointed. Better chance will come, but we have always bear in mind that our work is not for a few for this lifetime only, but for the coming lives also. Thank you very much for giving me an opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, brother. Thank you very much. We also have Brother Divakarji, who is the current president of Delhi Federation. Brother Divakar, would you like to add something to the topic that has been discussed today?
Yes, it was a very good talk. And I am reminded of Achyut Patwardhanji, who in 1989 had convention, international convention, said that our life should be like our eyes. Our eyes cannot tolerate an undesirable object at any time. It throws away. We close our eyes. So our life should be like our eyes. The eyes cannot tolerate undesirable things even for a moment. That's what I just remembered when you were talking to us. Thank you very much. It was an excellent speech.
Thank you very much, brother. Now I would open the discussion to all the other members. If somebody else wants to add on, you're most welcome.
Rajiv Gupta ji, I have a question here.
Yes.
My name is Anup Jarit. I am a new entrant to Theosophy. तो सबसे पहले सबको मेरा नमस्कार सब ब्रदर सिस्टर्स को. कृष्णा जी से मेरा क्वेश्चन ये है कि जो आपने बताया है, it seems very very austere and very very I think difficult and challenging for a householder like us. जो आपने you have said about the things which a disciple should follow, the discipline and the lifestyle he has to live. It may be good for a renunciate. The man who has renunciated he has done the renunciation. But for a householder, how do we go for discipleship?
Before going forward, Master says another place that we don't have to go to Himalayas to realize. We don't have to go to Himalayas to realize. If we are establishing that connect, if we are establishing the connect through meditation, through study, through service and all that, maybe we can carry the impression or the consciousness of the Master wherever you go. Maybe you are a gruhastha or a person who is leading a family life, or maybe you are working in an office, maybe you are picking up your groceries in a market, still he can be there with you. It's not necessary that one has to do away with all this and move somewhere and sit in a position where he closes his eyes and nose and ears. So that's not expected out of an individual. Even Shankaracharya says this, Adi Shankara. He also says that we don't have to, it is for us who are sannyasis who are doing this. But the person who is in the gruhastha, or person who is carrying on the work, staying at home, his progress is faster because he is able to remove and work objectively without getting caught in unnecessary things. So we have to have the discretion as a householder or as a person living in the ordinary sense, and choose what is required, what is not required, go after such things which are of permanent value and drop things which are not of permanent value. Over a period of time, maybe period of lives, we might become what we aspire to become. So it's not something which is a short-term 5-year plan like India used to have 5-year plan. It's not like that. It is something which we keep on working at it, shaping it, and over a period of time, yes, it can happen. Maybe period of lives, as Master himself said. So it could be that. So we don't have to feel disheartened that I am in a state of samsara. Samsara means if we are attached to all the things which are in samsara, we are in samsara. If I am practicing due attachment, then I am not in samsara, you know. So that's the way one has to work towards the goal. With due attachment, one could move towards the goal. Yeah.
Right. Thank you very much. And one more small question. So for making spiritual progress, that means to walk on the spiritual path, it's a must that we should have a guru.
See, if you're talking about the Guru whom we see in dimes and dozens, I'm not talking about that sort of a Guru. And spirituality is moving away from materiality. That's spirituality in a way. So as I'm living more with material possessions, material things, and if I'm only having the due attachment, which I talked about just some time back, and I'm not really looking for a teacher externally. I'm not looking for a teacher externally. When I'm working on these paths and these methods, yes, when I'm reaching that stage of selflessness, one gets picked. So at that point of time, who happens to be your guru? Maybe you know and he knows.
Okay.
So it's
Thank
not
you.
necessary that we should talk about it
Okay.
loud.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Brother Jairath, your questions were answered.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Well, is there anyone else amongst us who would like to comment or ask any question? So I think now we can close the meeting. Thank you very much again, brother N.C. Krishna
Yes.
ji.
I thank you for giving me yet another opportunity. Thank you very much. It made my time, you know, I thought about it ever since Mathuruji talked about it. So I thought about it so I could contemplate more on this. Most of it is my own notes. Some information which I have talked about masters is extracts from the masters letters, but other things, other points which I've made is from my own contemplation.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So we'll close the meeting with the universal prayer. Kindly mute your mics. O hidden life, vibrant in every atom. O hidden light, shining in every creature. O hidden love, embracing all in oneness. May each who feels himself as one with thee know he is also one with every other. So thank you very much for attending the meeting. Thank you all. We'll close the link now. Thank you very much.